Maybe you've been digging around in the Fittopedia and going, why can't I use this adjustment on this armhole style? Why can't you? Maybe you can. So by now you might have noticed that this one here, this is just the set-in sleeve, set-in armhole, and we've done a rounded back adjustment. I'm sorry I used pink paper. I know in the Fittopedia, pink always means trim away. I just used pink because I thought it'd be really visible, and then I realized, oh, these look just like my drawings. So sorry about that. So this, I'm showing you rounded so you can see the excess paper, you can see the adjustment here. So this is a set-in armhole. We've done a rounded low back adjustment. So we've lifted this up and we've given it, this extra up here at the top. You can see that, right? So what if you don't want a dart? Okay, first of all, don't knock darts until you try them up here at your shoulder, all right? So darts are an amazing shaping tool. They're far less visible than you think they are, especially in an area right here, and they have a really big impact. But say that you don't want a dart there, or you'd like to explore not having a dart, and we wanted to try maybe one of these adjustments. So on the cut-on armhole or cut-on sleeve and the princess seam that goes to the armhole here, you notice that the way I did this one was I just sliced across and along the armhole here in the seam line there between the seam allowance and the body of the garment, and I lifted it up. And then that way we didn't have to do any other changes, right? We just needed to straighten this out. We need to make sure we still have a right angle here. Our shoulder line has stayed the same. Our armhole has stayed the same. Everything has stayed the same, and we've still lifted this up, just like we did on the set-in armhole, right? That looks like about the same. I think I added a little bit more here than I did here, or maybe, yeah, I did. So on this one here, I only added a 1/4 inch. This is a 50%, so that's a 1/2 inch adjustment. This one here, that's like a full inch there. That'd be kind of a lot. Maybe you need that, but I don't think you're ever gonna need something that much. So it looks roughly the same. So why can't you just do this to this? Let's try it. All right, so here we have our set-in armhole, and there's no dart up here. If you had a dart, you can cut around it like I do in a lot of the adjustments. So we're gonna go across here in this lower back area here, or I like to call this the mid back, but I'm using the conventional term of low back that's used in home sewing. This is, to me, the mid back, so I may say that occasionally. So we're gonna cut it straight across. And now we're gonna go along the armhole. Now I know that I've also been talking to you guys about, if you're new to drafting, trim off all the seam allowances and add it back later. This is one instance where you're probably gonna find the seam allowance really helpful to have there as kind of a buffer, right? So let's put a couple of pieces of paper back here, and we'll get it here, and we'll raise this up. We could raise it the same exact amount that we raised it here, right? So it's about a 1/4 inch. So we'll raise that up. And we're just gonna let this relax over here, raise that up a 1/4 inch along the center back. And now let's secure it. So now what we have done now, we've pulled the neck away a little bit, it looks like, but we really haven't. So if we line this up on the line here, you can see that really what we did was we kicked out the lower back here. So let's just draw a line and see. This keeps your center back on full. This is the goal here. So don't ever lose sight of why some of these adjustments are done the way they are. If you're trying to keep your back on the fold, you have to remember that. You can't just willy-nilly create a line that isn't straight, that you can't put it on the fold, right? So don't forget that part. All right, so now here we go. We have no dart here. We've lifted this up and we've kept our center back on the fold. Let's see how different they are. I mean, honestly, it's pretty hard to tell the difference. Really what we're seeing here is this dart shaping. So honestly, I really think you can do this and then you don't add a dart. And you would have to trim this off here. You have to make sure you have a right angle here. Don't skip that. You don't want a little hill, right, at your center back neck, right? So we take our ruler here, make sure we have a right angle. And you have now added the same amount you added here without the dart. Now, I'm gonna just be darts advocate here. Dart is very valuable for us. It's very valuable. She does a lot of work for us, and we really respect Dart. Dart gives us some shaping opportunities that just can't be beat. So if you are, wanting this extra space here, and maybe you don't want to make the garment rounded and cup the upper back, you're not going to get as close of a fit as you would with a dart, but you still have added this little bit. You've raised your neck, you've raised your shoulder, and got that up closer up here so that it's not pulling on your front neck if that's all you need. So you might try this before doing this and see if you can get away with this before you add the dart. So, and you can do this with the flat back as well. So if we went the other way, let's look at it, what it would do. So if we were going to pull this down to create a flatter back like this, let's overlap it about that amount here. I did a little more than I just did on the rounded. And now same thing here, you're going to draw in your center back line, make sure it's straight, make sure you're at a right angle, and now you have done kind of the same thing, whereas before we overlapped it here and we pulled it down here. So let's compare to our original. So let's compare to our original here. And there we go, we've pulled that down. So I do think that you can do some of these adjustments on multiple armholes and maybe forego having a dart or more work. So I want to try this on the Raglan and the Yoke as well, because those are two others that we do a different adjustment for. All right, so for the Yoke, for a lower back adjustment, this mid back area, we round this seam here, or we make it concave if we want it to be flatter. And in this case, maybe you don't want that to happen because, like I say in the original video, maybe you have some plaid you're trying to match, or maybe you just don't really want it to be an obvious adjustment. Let's see if we can get this to work on a yoke. So in this case, I'm just gonna cut, I can cut along the seam line here, but we don't really have to be that specific. We'll just cut a straight across and along the armhole again, and then down to make our hinge, right? So now we have a little bit there. Let's put our piece of paper back here. So now the thing about this is that now we've pulled this whole adjustment to the yoke only. And we may have wanted a little bit of it on the lower back. So that's something you're going to have to weigh the pros and cons of. So if we raise this, a 1/4 of an inch, which would be like a 1/2 inch, quite a bit. And now we can straighten this out. And let's see if we can get this truly straight. I'm going to trim off this paper along this edge here so I can see the straight line of the bottom edge. And we're going to line that up on one of these lines on the cutting mat here. And I'm also going to line up the center back on this line here. And yeah, there we go. We've maintained that fold. You have to maintain the fold on the yoke because otherwise you would have a seam there and you don't want a seam on a yoke. And then there we go. We've added that amount. Now let's compare. And we've pulled it up, got it closer to the neck, added that little bit of space there. So if you don't really want a really exaggerated curve along here, you could probably try this and see if this will be sufficient. And then you haven't changed anything else. You haven't changed your neck line, your shoulder, your armhole length, and you just need to make sure you have that right angle right there. So, all right, last one, let's try the Raglan. All right, so the Raglan may have a smaller impact by doing this, but maybe you could try even a couple places. So essentially we're kind of doing what we did for the center back seam. So we're going to cut across and we're going to cut along the seam allowance there and then down. Let's make sure this isn't tethered there. All right, so let's slip some paper back here underneath both of these spots here. And now again, we're going to raise this up and we're just raising it along here. Remember, we're leaving this down. We're leaving that little silhouette in its place because we still want that shape. So let's say we want to raise this, if it was a real person, it would be a 1/2 inch. So we'll raise it 1/4 inch just like that. We get a different effect with the raglan because it's a smaller piece. It's really narrow right here. We don't have the full width of the back, so we don't have as much real estate to work with. So if we did this and then we left our armhole the same, we left our neck the same, let's see if we can still get a center back line that maintains our neck, and we do. So let's check it out here. And see, what I'm checking is making sure that the center back line stays at that point right there. We don't want to change the neckline length, right? Okay, so now let's compare it to our original. And you can see doing that 1/4 inch raised at the 1/4 inch, and it looks pretty good. So it has probably a smaller impact than if we had done it through here in the neck with a dart, if we were doing the rounded, or overlapping if it was flat. But you can see that we've maintained all these edges here. So let's check it out if we were to do the flat, because when we did the flat version, we pinched out a little bit in the neck, which, you know, changes your neck seam, so you have to change facings, you have to change your collar, and you may need to adjust any facings, so just remember that you need to check all your pattern pieces and make sure if they're laying, you know, flush with the garment, you always have to check. All right, and we still need a right angle. You can tell this one's a little bit kicked out there, but we could get a right angle there, no problem. All right, so let's try it the other way. All right, so let's try this on the raglan if we were going to be doing a flat back, because I feel like that one may not be as successful. So again, let's put a line across this mid-back area here. We're going to cut across and along our seam line here, creating a hinge right up here at the neck. So our hinge is right there. We don't probably need any paper on this one, so let's do the same amount of adjustment. This would be quite a bit. I know it doesn't look like much on this little guy, but it would be quite a bit in real life. So we're going to pull this down to when we think it might be touching that line, and we're leaving the seam allowance alone, right? So we're trying to get that all the way down there. All right, so let's temporarily this, and now we will put some paper here along the center back and under this little gap that we created. And yeah, you see that's hanging off the seam allowance there. We're going to trim off this little wing here of paper. So I'm going to trim off the purple first so I can see it when I flip it over, and I can trim off this little wing there. All right. And so now let's see what's happening along the center back. So let's draw a line straight along our center back here. So I already see something I'm a little concerned with right here. So you can see right here, do you see how my neck isn't touching along the center back here? That could be problematic. So the first thing I would probably do is I would measure the neckline before I made the change. I would probably put it back if I didn't measure it first, and then I would measure it after, because the goal really is to keep that same length. Now, the position of the neck and all that, that does make a difference, but we're here to change that because of a fit issue. We were wanting to change that angle there. So let's look at the original here, and let's actually trim this paper away so we can see the impact. I haven't made my right angle at center back yet. At the neck, right there. That would be a point right there, I can tell. So let's lay it on here. Now, honestly, this doesn't look much different than this. And so this is why I say, make sure you measure it and then check the distance. This is quite obviously, there's a gap there. Just filling it in doesn't make the length okay. You never know. So you need to measure it. So let's see here. We're going to measure along this little neck here, and it's 1 5/8. And let's see about this one here. This one's 1 3/4. So it really is 1/8 of an inch longer. So what we would want to do is trim that along the neckline there. So I would look along this neck seam right here, because this is the length. This is the length that we're trying to get back to where we want it. So we're only trying to affect that. So I'm going to put my ruler up and I'm going to trim off 1/8 of an inch going that way, just like this. And then we can blend it in here with the original armhole. And we would trim it off. It's getting a little dicey with that little tiny seam allowance and my hinge there. But now there we go. Now we have a neckline that looks more like the length it was. And we can see our impact better of the change that we made. That looks pretty good. I like this a lot better than altering the length of the neck or putting a dart there. So if you are wanting to do some of these changes and you're like, why can't I do that on another armhole? Maybe you can. Just remember, you're always looking, if your garment's on the fold, you want to make sure it can still be on the fold. So you need a straight center back. If you are trying not to affect other seams, make sure it doesn't affect other seams. And then if there's somewhere that needs to be a right angle, make sure it's still a right angle and you can do your changes and have some fun with it. There's never one way to do things. There's lots of different ways to do it. You can interchange a lot of these fitting things. So make sure you pick up the Fittopedia guide. All of these things are in there. They're all hyperlinked to tutorials, and I'll have more of these videos to kind of help you keep track of all of them, because I know there's so many of them. Even I got confused trying to make them all. So it's just a lot of information at once. So we're gonna get through it together and you're really gonna get a handle on this, and I hope it helps you. I hope you're enjoying my Fittopedia fitting series, and if you want to get more fitting tutorials, just check the description. There's going to be links to more, and if you would like a printed version of these mini tutorials, just check the description or look under the video, and eventually you'll be able to make your own little Fittopedia booklet, and it'll be a really great, quick, easy reference to how to diagnose and fit the issue that you're working on. So I hope you're getting a lot out of the series. Please let me know, like, comment, and subscribe, and follow along for more. Thanks for watching.